Okay, Aaron, 4 minutes to go.
Yeah, look, but don't rush this because entertainment is about ritual. Entertainment is about superstition. Entertainment is about putting on a show. And before we put on a show around here, especially one of our spectaculars, you know that the final ritual is always to read to Oscar from his favorite book, which is, of course, Puffin, Bird of the Open Seas by Lynn Martin. Okay? Everyone knows this is our ritual. This is our practice. And as such, we have to do it. We have to make the time to do it. Okay? Oscar, we were not going to skip this, Oscar. The common puffin's tiny gray eyes, dressed up for spring, are no less remarkable. Rimmed in a red shade that matches the bill's red color, the eye at the top is capped with a triangular blue-gray scale. A leathery rectangular scale of the same color appears below each eye. These two adornments, together with the dark lash line extending from the eye across the cheek, give the puffin's face a clownish appearance. The puffin's feet, now a brilliant shade of vermilion, complete its spring outfit. It's May, Oscar. It's May.
La imagen por la cual vale la pena arriesgar la vida, sacrificarse hasta la muerte en los campos de batalla de todos los continentes del mundo.
Live from West Berlin, it's the committee program sponsored by Cadre Cigarettes, the national cigarette of Equatorial Fredonia, and starring Arun Chowdhury, Julia Doubleday, Forrest, Lovette, Fiamma, Meli, Xhevat, Kastrati, and yours truly, Jacopo, Castelletti. And now, a man who is not afraid to read a stuffed bird a story, Arun Chowdhury.
Hi. Thank you, Jacopo. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you. This is our post-May Day Spectacular. Maybe it would have had more bite as our May Day Spectacular. People around here will tell you they don't get paid. People around here will tell you they have too many things to do. So people around here are responsible for your lack of a May Day Spectacular and your having a post-May Day Spectacular. So I wanna put that squarely on you all, Jacopo, you and the rest of the team. I want you to carry that, okay? In the spirit of, we're going through it and getting it done, we're going to do one of the objects things where I go around and I find something, but we make it sound classy and British.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay, roll.
And now, the history of a run in 100 objects. Yes. Quite.
Hi, and welcome to the history of a run in 100 objects, when we do highlight some of the fantastic artifacts we have lying around the committee studios, the committee headquarters office, and generally, we seek to better understand ourselves through things. I think that's the thing Americans love to do very specifically. But Jacopo, today it also borders on the world of design, so that's why I thought it'd be cool if you were on here. And what I unearthed when I was moving some stuff around is actually, this is a cool thing. This is a Dutch resistance flyer from the WW2. And let me show that to you. I'll show that to you. Zoek het zel fifth zoig. What it is it's 4 pigs. And it says, can you find the 5th pig? So you're just handing this around. It's pigs. Nobody's mad. But then, if you fold it, kind of Mad Magazine style. Did you guys get a lot of Mad Magazine in Italy? Are you familiar with because it really was genre breaking in a lot of ways.
Yeah, nah, unfortunately.
Yeah, so they used to have a back cover where you folded it and even the words would line up and say new things and the pictures would line up. This is one of those. So when you fold it all correctly, you get Hitler. You see that? Hitler's the 5th pig. Spoiler for everyone at home. The 5th pig was Hitler. The 5th pig was Hitler. So you have your resistance flyer, you're in Utrecht, you're wandering around, somebody hands that to you. You don't get in trouble because it's just pigs. But then when you put it together, you got yourself Hitler right there. That's Hitler. So that's my object for today. What do you think?
It's cool. I think they've been doing this in other cases. There have been remakes in the last years, which were cool. but the original.
Yeah, I would encourage you to check out the Mad Magazine stuff. They did a lot of sort of really politically subversive things with stuff like this. There isn't anything like it now that's sort of so wacky and yet pointed and slightly earnest in its unearnestness. I don't know how to describe Mad Magazine. I don't know. We got to get deeper into this for you. I think it would be helpful for you.
That would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Spectacular. Let's go.
This is Cross Atlantic Crosstalk.
Hi, welcome to the committee program post May Day Spectacular. We wanted to get our shit together for May Day. We didn't, and so now the spectacular has moved to a week later. But making it extra spectacular is the return of the Cross Atlantic Crosstalk gang. That is Ellie Mayo-Hagan, the director of the Class think tank in the UK, and the show's own deputy director, Julia Doubleday. Hello to you both.
Hi.
I've only just noticed how bizarre your desk is. That's a toucan.
You just noticed
one
that?
Of those...
It's a puffin. He's had it.
That's Oscar.
Forever.
He smells of the sea.
Is that a real puffin?
It's a real taxidermied puffin. Yes, he's from
He
Iceland.
bought it in duty free.
While under the influence of the drug Ambien, which we were speaking of earlier. Yeah. So I don't remember much. I was coming home from Finland, and 2 weeks later, Oscar arrived home from Finland, and we've been inseparable ever since.
That's beautiful.
And I get him if a run dies. It's already been discussed.
That's right. My children have
Well,
abjectly said they
about this.
do not want the puffin. They do not like Oscar. They do not want to talk about Oscar. They don't like it.
To be fair, the odds that a run actually has a will are, I'm going to say 0. So it's going to be a mad grab.
If you are a lawyer who wants to help me put together a will for free or for cheap, please get in touch with the show, program at committee.org. And you need to do that in the next 3 years. Thank you. Appreciate you. So actually, I want to take advantage of having you here, Ellie, to ask you to help us make sense of of the British local elections. I mean, look, I will say on the surface, we all saw that certainly London flipped some old-timey seats, like Margaret Thatcher's favorite seat, over to Labour. Other places we saw the Tories get blunted by the Greens and by the Lib Dems. What was your take on the shape of the night, especially considering the pressures, both criminal and otherwise, that Boris Johnson and the Tories find themselves under? How did you think the night went?
So in terms of Boris Johnson and all of the stuff that he's been doing, I think that actually hasn't been good for Labour, because I think that people's attitude is not, I have to vote Labour because the Conservatives are really bad. Sorry, the cat.
No,
Can I
it's all
start
good.
that again?
Yeah. No, you're good. Continue.
Okay. What was I saying? Yeah, I don't think that people are like, the Conservatives are really bad, so I have to vote Labour. I think people are like, politicians are all the same. And I think that will depress turnout at elections. I mean, I haven't looked at turnout for these local elections, but it's always quite low. And I think that will actually ironically harm Labour. Having said that, the Tories did do pretty badly in these elections. And I think that has to be traced back to like various things, not just Partygate, but the cost of living crisis, the scandal about Rishi Sunak avoiding tax, all of this stuff. And I think what I'm worried about is that Labour did really well in London. Like, just to say that not all seats in the UK were contested either, so there's just lots of places that didn't have an election. But Labour did really well in London. It won Wandsworth Council, Westminster Council, which has been Tory since 1964, and Barnet Council, which is an absolutely dreadful council under the Tories. So that's good. But elsewhere, I don't think it really, like, Labour really had the performance that it needed to in order to feel confident about its strategy. Because basically Labour's strategy at the moment is like alienate their entire voting coalition in order to attract what I think in America you would call like the Rust Belt voters.
Yeah, we're very familiar with this as a strategy as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I would be if I mean I don't know how they're feeling, but if I was them, I would be worried about that strategy because I think that actually the sort of electoral trends in this country, which I think are created by demographic change and economics, but the electoral trends in this country is that cities are getting more and more progressive, and the kind of sometimes the commuter belt, so the sort of outer ring of the city is because people are being displaced out, so they have to kind of travel in. That's getting more progressive, but rural areas and towns are becoming less and less progressive, and I think that's largely because young people don't stay in them because there's not as many jobs. And I don't think I've seen anything in this election that shows that Labour has managed to reverse that trend or kind of deal with that trend in any way. And I think it's still going, that trend, in spite of them sort of burning lots of bridges in order to attract these kind of voters in rural areas and towns.
I mean, very specifically, they did not get these voters, right? Places like Hartlepool, like kind of backslid, or folks were saying that, that they're actually got fewer votes in these communities than Jeremy Corbyn did in 2018. So I think you could argue that these voters who you're saying they're burning all this political capital to get, they didn't even manage to get any of them. So it really does seem like a futile exercise.
Yeah, like they did make gains in some places. I can't remember which ones, but they did, like Cumberland, although that's a new council, but they won that. And
you feel like that's representative of this sort of, former kind of red wallish working class description?
Yeah, I would say. And then also, I'm sorry, I can't remember all. There's been so many seats that I've
And you all name them crazy things, so we understand, yeah.
Yeah. But, like, for example, Sheffield. So Sheffield was, that's a northern... It's like I can't think of an American equivalent of Sheffield for your listeners, but for your viewers. But basically, it's like... it's a former, like, where there's been like a town with a strong working class identity, and there's like a lot of former mining communities there, and it's kind of semi-rural, so it's on the borders of a national park. And Sheffield was a target seat for Labour. So what that will mean is that they spent more on ads there, they flooded it with canvassers and popular MPs or well-known MPs, and they didn't win it, which I think is kind of worrying. So yeah, I think they did have quite a good election, Labour, but I don't think they've done enough to justify their strategy. I think their strategy is quite high risk. I don't really understand it. I don't understand their rationale, and I think these elections suggest that it's not paying off necessarily.
Yeah. I think that's right. I mean, but I think it's also these kind of results that are kind of blech, neither here nor there, also don't have people asking tough questions to the strategy of leadership. Like, no one's really going to be asking Keir Starmer, I think, tough questions about this, although I could be wrong. Maybe you all are more analytical than we are in the U.S. about these things. But, I mean, we see the hangover of our last few elections, and sort of now we have a trend on TV where it's a cool contrarian thing to say to be Democrats are going to do bad in midterms as we think they are, which is a lie. That is not true. They are going to do extremely poorly. Would you agree, Julia Doubleday?
Yeah, I also think that trend maybe died down a little bit in recent weeks. Like, that was definitely a thing I was hearing from, I think, mostly from operatives. I think to a degree, I'm not sure those people even believe that. It's more of a just like try to control the narrative thing, or it's a denial thing. But yeah, I don't see any way that the Democrats can come back from the place they're in. Roe v. Wade actually could be something of a motivator to get the Democrats out, for sure. So I mean, if anything, that, as horrific as it is in terms of electorally, it may save their ass in the midterms. But I'm not convinced that that's even enough, because I think for a lot of people, they feel like this is horrific. The Democrats have every branch of government and they're doing nothing. So why is that motivating me to come out and vote Democrat? Now, the boomers who have just been buying this bullshit for decades That's not their perspective. They're like, well, we just have to get out and vote harder. But for younger people, we know that they could end the filibuster tomorrow. We know that they could encode Roe v. Wade into law tomorrow. They're choosing.
Obama promised to do it in 2008.
Obama promised to do it in 2008, and he had a supermajority,
yeah.
and he had the ability to do it.
Yeah.
And then he said, I'd rather focus on things that aren't so controversial. So that's why we are where we are. The Democrats have been fundraising on they're going to take away your right to choose for decades. And in the meantime, anytime they had power, they never took the steps necessary to encode it into law. They never did what they said that they would do. And so it can go either way. On the one hand, like, yes, older voters who are and people who are just desperate to pull out the stops to do whatever they can to stop this from happening, which I definitely empathize with, are going to come out and vote for Democrats. But there's a lot of other people that feel like, you've lied to us so many times. You have the power to do it. Show us that you're going to do it, or go fuck yourself. Because, right now there's basically 2 votes holding up killing the filibuster, according to what we know. There may be other people hiding behind.
Yeah, there's 2 or 3
votes
behind them, I think, who enjoy not having to answer.
So with Manchin and Sinema, it's like, well, what can we possibly do about Manchin and Sinema? The entire weight of the party should be on them. Nobody's even pressuring them. Biden literally a couple days ago said he doesn't want to comment on the filibuster. I mean, can you imagine the inverse case where some Republican is holding up Trump's agenda with their 1 vote? Trump would be on Fox News 24 hours a day calling this guy a loser, pervert.
He'd be in their district as well, right? He'd be working
in their
it.
district.
Yeah.
He would be picking their opponent. He would be like, you're out because I have power in the party.
And when Bernie did that to Manchin, all the Democrats pressured him to cut it out, which was, I thought, also extremely lame.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We also know that the Republicans are going just no holds barred against Madison Cawthorn for a comment he made about how he's been invited to cocaine orgies by the Republicans. Ever since he made that comment, everyone was kind of like, he wants a lot of attention, who knows? But ever since he made that comment, there's been constant drip releases of incriminating.
Yeah, he's in trouble.
He's in trouble. I mean, they released a bunch of very fucking weird, I personally think it's fratty shit, but sexually inappropriate fratty shit.
People just trying to embarrass him and hurt him because he went against the party. But it's true, right? There's consequences.
It's just goes to show there are things the party can do. And I happen to know that when you run, the party asks for a self-oppo file on yourself. Collect everything that we could find so that we know what we're going to be dealing with if this comes up. I call it the self-blackmail file. No, I'm not going to ever fucking do that for the D-Trip, because if they have that information, they completely control you. So
you also saw what can happen with that information when J.D. Vance's campaign by accidentally put it in a file dump with a bunch of other things that they made public, thereby making their own opposition file public, which is definitely not smart politics.
Well, that also happened with the WikiLeaks. In Hillary's emails, there was specifically an email that had a document attached that was all of the things Clinton said in closed-door private speeches that would be bad if they got out, and they put them all in one place in one document. And it's like, you guys are stupid.
What kind
Why
of
would
things?
you do that?
What kind of things
just
did you
making
say?
promises to donors to donors,
Basically,
saying,
economically regressive stuff, right? Like promises to shareholders.
Well, no, and also saying we may have one position in public and one in private that's different. We may say we're for these social policies, but don't worry about it. Essentially, that's not going to happen. Also making derogatory comments about environmentalists and talking about how they just need to get a life, and so just a bunch of stuff that is exactly who I think Hillary Clinton is as a person. But for the propagandized masses who consume a really happy feminist icon version of her, that would be very out of step with their idea of what Hillary Clinton is, which is not a power-hungry sociopath.
I will say, talking about repro again, just really quick, and we actually talk about it later in the show, but Liz Winstead was supposed to come on the show today to talk about it. Nothing to do with the Roe v. Wade case, just because it's been so bad in America, and even with Roe v. Wade in place, right? It was such a
Right.
symbolic thing for Democrats because actually the power that Republicans have to stop people from having abortions is at the state level, is the parking lot in a clinic isn't big enough, right? Like it's a death by 1,000 cuts. So it's not like Americans had access to abortion to begin with. I mean, Ellie, when you look at this from the outside, I mean, does this seem shocking, or it's just like, yeah, Americans are America-ing?
No, it was shocking. I'm in a WhatsApp group of like a bunch of my female friends, and we were all talking about it that day. It was like, it's just upsetting, isn't it, as a woman, wherever you are, like, to see the sort of world's biggest economy do something like that is like quite scary. And the Times newspaper wrote an editorial agreeing with the decision as well, which was kind of worrying. And in this country, I'm sure I've talked about it here before, we have this kind of anti-trans movement, like very lot of transphobia, and and it's mainly coming from women who claim to be progressive, who say that trans people are a threat to women's rights. So it's not really coming from the extreme right as it is in the US or the Republican Party or evangelical Christians. It's coming from so-called feminists. But those feminists are in communication with, and in many cases being financially supported by, the same people in the US that are taking abortion away from the people who need it. And so I think there is a fear here that any gains made in kind of dismantling the rights of trans people will be sort of transferred over to also get rid of the right to abortion. So there's one specific example of this, which is called, I'm going to get it wrong here. It's called Gillick competence, and it's basically this sort of like understanding in the NHS about what you're allowed to consent to as a young person, and like where you're sort of seen as competent to be able to consent and where you're not. And so basically a lot of transphobes have been trying to say that young people are not able to consent to be given puberty blockers when they're transgender. But because they're questioning this law of Gillick competence, what that means is that any person under a certain age who wants an abortion might not be able to get one.
Totally.
So it does have these like
exactly
knock-on effects. And I think that's what people are worried about here. But also, in Northern Ireland, there's a total ban on abortion still. And I don't think we talk about that enough in the UK. We often look at what America's doing, but we don't actually look at what our own country's doing. So, I mean, if Sinn Féin gets in the local elections, maybe that'll herald a change. But, I don't know whether that will come, like...
I mean, we did see the big Yes campaign in the Republic of Ireland. I mean, it's so I think a lot of us feel like, oh, so Ireland's fine. The UK seems okay. We don't actually think of Northern Ireland as being as distinctive as it is. Actually, was something I hadn't even thought about.
Yeah, it's it's bad, but we were very it's not been a good thing. Like it's good week for women here. I think there's been a lot of shock. Is
abortive care a normal part of the NHS? Do you have to go to a special division of the NHS, or do you just see is there any way that there is a sort of reproductive rights ghetto inside the NHS where it somehow is treated differently, or is it really truly just part of the system?
So I haven't had an abortion, but I have had a friend who has, and I went with her to get it done. And I think she was referred by her doctor, and then she just went to the NHS, and then she was given like a pill, and then you take it once, and then like 12 hours later you take another one, and then like it's sort of a chemical abortion. It creates, and I think that was the that was within the NHS. But just to say that in this country, abortion is actually technically illegal. It's just there's exemptions based on mental health grounds or like safety grounds, and the culture is such that all abortions get granted really on mental health grounds. But technically it's not legal here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's been lots of campaigns to get it decriminalised, and I don't recall it being decriminalised. So I think that is still the case. But so I think you still have to have your abortion approved by 2 doctors here.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a funny area because we have quite late term abortions as well. So we have like 24 weeks is the cut-off point here, which like a tiny proportion of abortions happen that late. Like most of them are because there's something wrong and it's a matter of life and death. Most abortions happen like pretty quickly after the woman becomes pregnant. And you know, if you want one in this country, you can get one like without any problems. But it is strange that it's sort of matched up with this kind of that it not being strictly legal and that you needing 2 doctors to say like
they're
yes.
still shining a light, and there's something sort of special and less desirable about this kind of medical attention in a way.
Yeah. And of course, there's like, I mean, we don't have an evangelical movement like in the US. Like, it's nothing like what you have, but like, it doesn't have as much money and power. It isn't really part of our political parties, but of course, there are churches that do try and intervene. You know, they provide counselling. Some of your anti-abortion protesters started picketing our clinics a few years ago. And, you know, at my doctor's surgery, I saw a kind of anti-abortion poster in the reception once, and I, like, insisted that they take it down. So there is a bit of that, but I would be exaggerating if I said it was on the same level as the US, because it definitely
They're just tourists. These crazy evangelicals, they have their fetus jars with them wherever they go. You know, they're going to Puerto Rico, they take it. You know, they're going to Hawaii, they're going to London, whatever it is. They just, you know.
Yeah. And the tiny plastic models of babies, that's like, they sort of show you that. And
it's no good.
Yeah.
It's no good.
Yeah.
Speaking of no good, Julia, and you tell me exactly the thing, but you texted me something that was sort of horrible. Maybe you tweeted it before. I don't know. But
I've been texting and tweeting so many horrible
No, I
things.
know, but this was the
be a
simple
little more
math
specific.
where it was like, you know, where it was people revaluing the
Sure.
deaths, and it was like, actually, if you do the math, there's
Yes,
no
I will-
receding, there's no getting worse COVID.
I will
Okay,
help
go ahead.
you and all of the American people and the American press.
Yeah, simplify
understand
this.
what's
Make it as
actually
simple as you
happening
did in that thing.
with COVID, because unfortunately, our press has completely abdicated their responsibility to hold Biden accountable for this pandemic, and we are now arguably worse off than we were a year ago. So here's the reality. We just hit 1 million Americans dead of COVID. 1 million in 25 months. When I said that at least 1 million people would die of COVID, I was treated as crazy by every person. Nobody who called me crazy for that is going to come around and listen to me now. They're still going to call me crazy. But I was right, and Dr. Fauci's prediction, 100 to 200,000 max, was really fucking wrong. So if you look at these deaths, 400,000 people had died when Biden took office. The reason I specifically remember this is because Biden and Harris decided to have a
Mission accomplished party, yeah.
no, not a mission accomplished party, a maudlin crocodile tear ceremony on the mall the night before inauguration to honor
I forgot about that.
400,000 Americans that unnecessarily died under Trump because of his botched pandemic response. They all got up there, they all cried, and they all pretended to give a shit. And now we've hit 1 million deaths. You want to know how much they're acknowledging? Forget the fucking ceremony on the mall for the 600,000 people that they've killed. There's not even a mention of it on his Twitter anywhere. He did a public speech yesterday where he wanted to talk about inflation. We're in full-on pandemic denial mode. Like, hit the gas on that shit because we have no fucking plan, and the press is helping them out every step of the way. So here are the numbers. 400,000 people died under Trump in 10 months, average of 40,000 people per month. Obviously, that goes up and down depending on where we are in the wave, but average 40,000 deaths per month. Biden has been in office for 15 months. 600,000 people have died. That's 40,000 people per month. Every single month of the pandemic, 40,000 people, 40,000
The
Americans
average doesn't
have died.
change. Yeah, that's what sort of, that's the...
Biden has not reduced deaths at all. It's not just that deaths didn't stop. They never changed. He has done nothing. And if you look at the vaccine resistance, which is another thing they're refusing to acknowledge, in Omicron, which they told us was mild, which was not mild. There is a new study out yesterday that is currently being peer reviewed that showed that Omicron is just as motherfucking deadly as the early variants. Now, how did it get labeled mild when there wasn't enough time yet to study whether or not it was, because people wanted to believe it and because the entire press was pushing it. It really stuck, and where it came from was a bunch of journalists who didn't understand the data, who were comparing rates of hospitalizations with rates of cases that were happening on the same day, even though there's a 2-week gap between those numbers. So when you have cases on this day, they have no relationships to the hospitalizations or deaths that happen on the same day. They have a relationship to hospitalizations that happen 2 weeks later, and they have a relationship to deaths that happen 3 weeks later. Nobody at the New York Times can apparently understand this because they've been reporting it this way over and over again. They're still reporting it this way. Cases are going up, but hospitalizations are low. That means hospitalizations are decoupled from cases. This is a very, very basic error in interpreting this data. They've been doing it for months, and yet they're still getting treated like some sort of public health service that we should be going to. These are journalists. They're journalists, and they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. So that mild name that they put onto it, not only is it going to turn out that it wasn't just slightly less mild, it wasn't anything. It was just fucking COVID. And they are putting people in situations where they're incorrectly assessing their risk. So now let's move on to the vaccine resistance. In the Omicron wave, which they claimed was not going to be deadly, about 200,000 people have died of Omicron so far, an incredibly deadly wave. 40% of those deaths were vaccinated people. Now, the Washington Post finally did an expose about this week, and people were angry to see it. They were like, well, this doesn't account, this is oversampling bias. This doesn't account for the fact that so many more people are vaccinated. And it's like, yes, that's true. Read into the article and they talk about that. It doesn't mean the vaccine doesn't work at all. It means that you still have a 12 times more likely to be hospitalized or die if you're unvaccinated. So of course, get vaccinated. But if you think it's a fucking acceptable outcome, a fucking acceptable way to be with this pandemic where 200,000 people die in every wave and 40% of them are vaccinated, we're right back at fucking square one. We're not back to square one, actually. We're halfway there. And as we continue to drop every public protection, ignore every public health advice, as we continue to allow unmitigated spread, we are creating super variants that are becoming more and more and more vaccine resistant. So Delta was more vax resistant than Alpha, obviously. Omicron was more vax resistant than Delta. The new Omicron is more vax resistant than the last Omicron, and all of them are more contagious than the previous ones. So the pandemic is over. It's based on motherfucking nothing. It's based on nothing. And every time I try to talk to people about this, they look at me like I'm crazy because they've been so socialized to feel like it's over. But if you have a counter argument, go look at the numbers and explain to me what the fuck the counter argument is. Because I think the counter argument is I'm sick of it and I'm in denial. The reality
that's for sure the counter argument to it. It just happens to be more powerful than, in some ways we want to give it credit for, right?
The White House Correspondents' Dinner was last week, and we all said this is a super spreader event. They put 3,000 unmasked people in a crowded room.
I ain't going there. What are you talking about?
Fauci refused to go the same day that he said the pandemic phase was over because he knew it was good for him. Biden went, although he wouldn't stay for the dinner to try to reduce risk, although he was up there speaking with no mask on.
This is sort of airplane logic where you're like, it's okay as long as I'm drinking alcohol.
They're the people. They're the people who are supposed to be telling us what's going on with the pandemic. They're yucking it up with Joe Biden about how specifically they joked about how they're at a super spreader event.
I actually want to put a thing. I think it's worse than that in a way. It's epidemiologically it can't be worse than you say. But I mean, the communications. It used to be, what are you going to do? Or we're doing everything. But the rise in openly hostile talking about other countries, specifically China, still wanting to pursue a zero COVID policy lockdown. Like, we see these insane articles. They're shooting people's dogs, like all these things. Like, Ellie, is that also happening? Or Julie, I mean, feel free to react. You know what I'm saying? But this is happening, right? Like, you see these articles.
I want to finish my thought about White House Correspondents' Dinner, which is that they made a big deal about how they had tested everyone. First of all, the rapid tests don't work very well anymore. We know that. Secondly, they often don't work until 3 or 4 days into your symptoms. We know that as well, but they're, again, ignoring science, the thing they promised they weren't going to do. Then at the dinner itself, they said every single person was tested. They said that over and over again. And then somebody mentioned, well, the staff wasn't tested. All of the staff serving them the entire night, walking around, no masks between all the tables. True? They were never tested because Arun, they're servants. They don't get tests. They're not human beings. So really a great case of just fucking, I don't know, karma. Like, you didn't give these people tests. Now, obviously, as we expected, cases are popping up from all over the White House Correspondents' Dinner. We don't know if Biden got it. It's perfectly possible that he did, but if he didn't get it this time, he'll get it another time. The entire press has now been exposed through this irresponsibility. And this is just the new normal, right? At the dinner, they're joking about, willingly being at a super spreader event. And it's like, okay, you're willingly there. The way they're covering it is, oh, that was their choice. They're willingly there. Are the workers willingly there, or do they just need to get paid? Are the families of workers who may be immunocompromised consenting to be, infected by Kim Kardashian and her boyfriend? Like, no, this is not how public health works. None of these people who have to be around you consent to your bullshit lack of just being socially responsible.
Just literally happened at the Gridiron dinner, which, Ellie, is another one of these stupid dinners that they have, which was like last month, where everybody who was there got COVID, including Kamala Harris's husband and stuff. So it's
And the last thing, I promise is the last thing, but the last thing I want to say about the Biden COVID response, along with now being in complete denial about the death rate, denial about the vaccine resistance, which is bringing us squarely back to the beginning of the pandemic, that we're destroying the effectiveness of the vaccine at a very, very rapid pace. Denial of long COVID. 10% of cases have long-term, even lifelong, debilitating effects. It affects every organ in your body, from your brain to your stomach to your heart. You can have a heart attack after you have it. You can have a stroke after you had it. All of these things are not things that happen with the flu, and they're not happening uncommonly. One study found that brain damage was noticed in 25% of people who had COVID of any severity. So don't you think it would be good to figure out whether that's an issue before we pursue a policy of forced mass infection? Not once, because you can get it again at the earliest 3 weeks, but generally around 3 months after you've had it, you can get it again. Do you think it's good to get a virus that gives you brain damage 3 times a year for the rest of your life? Do you think you're going to be doing well with that in 10 years when you've had it 30 times and you've never fully had time to recover from the damage it does to your system? So putting that aside, the other issue is the testing. They're suppressing the testing. In January, they announced that they would allow hospitals to stop reporting data to HHS, and myself, a lot of disability activists, a lot of doctors online were raising the red flag. This is very bad. They're unwinding testing. It's always bad when they try to bury data. And the only thing the media and the press thought to do was to publish a bunch of articles about how this was misinformation. Because even though it's true that they were getting rid of that metric and they were unwinding that data, there are other sources of data. So the data is redundant. And it's like, well, if you have 2 working brain cells, you understand that as you unwind testing, you don't cancel every single piece of data collection on the same day. You do it slowly behind the scenes. So that's exactly what happened. In February, a lot of the federal requirements were relaxed. Now, I'm in DC. The DC itself was now supposed to be reporting their cases and hospitalizations and deaths daily. They said, oh, we're not going to do that. We'll just do it weekly. We'll give you like a community spread number. We'll do it once a week. It's day 9, no reporting. I have not seen any numbers from DC since April 27th, I think. The wastewater data site, which is supposed to be the last place that you can check to see where cases are in your city, hasn't been updated since April 27th. Now, why is this relevant to vulnerable people? I live in a house with 3 people. One of them plays a live show in a band with no mask every Wednesday. And previously, I had been able to talk him out of performing on nights when cases were high in DC. This week, I have no data to show whether cases are high or low, so he played the show. This is exactly the kind of situations where people are getting forced into unsafe situations. They're getting forced to go to work. They're getting forced to go to school. They're getting forced to be exposed to other people because we don't even have the data to protect ourselves or make our own health decisions or advocate for ourselves. So at the end of the day, this isn't a policy of choose for yourself. It's a policy of forced infection. We have no choices. We have no data. And Trump never would have gotten away with the amount of just COVID cover-up that's happening right now. I have no way to know what COVID is doing in my city, and neither does anyone else.
Ellie, do you think there's the same level of engagement with COVID in the UK right now, or have people in Europe? We're kind of in a weird numbers are going down, but not as far down as they should, and some people are saying they may be about to come up again. I don't know how you all are off the continent.
So it's a bit different here to the US. So, well, first of all, things are just totally back to normal here.
Things are back to normal here. I was not saying they're not back to normal. I'm saying people are brainwashed as fuck because the death toll is not back to normal. It's just their behavior that's back to normal.
I think I support Britain not shutting down for the simple reason that I think because of the scandals about all of our politicians ignoring lockdown, I think if there was a lockdown here, we would just see mass civil disobedience. I just think people were already growing sick of lockdown. They were growing sick and tired of the pandemic. We were 2 years in, 18 months in, and then two things happened at the same time, which is there was a huge story that it turned out the government had just been breaking all the rules all the time. That was the first thing, and then the second thing was the Omicron was discovered, and there was talk of another lockdown, and I think those two things kind of coalesced in people's minds and just made them kind of very resistant to any kind of restriction. So I think we would see kind of mass civil disobedience in this country if there was another lockdown now, particularly after people are vaccinated. So that's why I'm not in favour of it. I don't think it will be effective. And it's slightly different. The history of COVID is slightly different here because we had a really strict lockdown almost straight away. I mean, we didn't have it soon enough. The government dragged its heels for 2 weeks, which really allowed COVID to spread around. But then we had a really strict lockdown from March until maybe the end of May, quite a long time, maybe even June. That was really strict, and people were not. They weren't even sitting in each other's gardens. They were sort of there was a whole phase where people were not allowed to sit down in a public park alone, and the police would literally come over and move them on. And what that means, and there's also a lot of evidence that these kind of emergency laws that were passed in order to enforce that lockdown have been, of course, been abused by police to sort of be racist, basically, and that a lot of fines were imposed on people that maybe that they shouldn't have been. And also that, some people, maybe they had a partner that they'd been with for decades and they weren't allowed to see them in their final moments and say goodbye to them, these kind of things. And what that has meant is that the left in this country has been, very divided. There's been, and then I would say the liberal, the left spectrum, the progressive spectrum. There's some people who are, they really want strict lockdown. They tend to always call for that, whatever the numbers say, whatever the situation is. And those people have exaggerated data a few times, actually. There's a group called Independent Sage, which is Sage is the commission that advises the government on lockdown, and Independent Sage is this independent group of scientists who've come together to kind of provide advice that they feel is less compromised, and some of the stuff they've put out has been a bit dodgy. So there's them, but then there's also this constituency on the left that's quite anti-lockdown because they think that it obscures wider social questions, we need to adapt to COVID by having massive public health investment, by giving people proper sick pay, that kind of thing, by generally making people more healthy, which I agree with, and I agree with, especially in this country, in the sense that like the genie is out of the bottle now. That we're not going to get rid of COVID in this country. I just don't think that's going to happen. However, that section of the left, I feel, has called things wrong, because there's been certain moments where there's been like a crunch point, where we know that the line is going to go up. And really, at that point, the government has left it so late that the only viable response to stop the health system collapsing is a lockdown. And that part of the left will still oppose a lockdown, even though, there's not really any other
It's
way,
actually the crisis where the only thing that addresses it is that, right?
Yeah, exactly, because the crisis is too imminent. So basically, so the left is quite divided. It's definitely not as I feel like the American left, from what I can see, is much more unified on the sense that there needs to be restrictions, whereas here, that isn't.
No.
I would say Americans
really
have broadly
that's
just given
not true.
up. Sorry, go
that's
ahead,
not
Julie.
true. Americans are in denial, and
So I mean
let
the
me
left,
back
sorry.
up also.
Including.
Not even the left. People I know, people who have been very following the science every step of the way, they're just tired of it. But I posit that being tired of it is very much a result of the media landscape that you're in. And if you're in a media landscape that for the last year has told you it's mild now, it's the flu, everyone's going to get it, you're going to be fine, without any discussion of the vaccine resistance, which is getting worse, by the way, and will continue to get worse, without any discussion of the fact that vulnerable people, disabled people, older people are still dying at the same numbers. These numbers haven't changed. 40,000 Americans dead every month forever is not a solution. So whatever the solution is, whether it involves lockdowns or not, what I'm trying to get out there is the actual information of what's happening, because people don't know that information. The first step before we make decisions is for people to understand what's happening. And when you talk to people about Biden, they think that he's done something about the pandemic. He hasn't. That's what the math shows. 40,000 people a month are dying. That's more than a typical flu season, and they're not all older people. So we can't go on like that forever. I'm sorry, lockdowns are maybe unfeasible. Killing 40,000 people every month is not feasible. It's insane. And people just want to bury their head in the sand about it. But there's so many things between total lockdown, and doing anything. I mean, what needs to happen during surges, masks indoors. That's the only thing I'm doing. I wear a mask when I'm indoors. When I'm outdoors, I socialize with my friends outside. When I'm indoors, I wear a mask, and I haven't gotten COVID. That's basically the only thing you need to do to significantly cut community spread. But people are just so horrified by this idea, and they also equate it to lockdown. I'm sorry, having to wear a mask indoors in a public space during a pandemic that's killing 40,000 people a month is not a big ask. And if you want to see your friends, sit on the patio that's 5 feet away. I mean, the only situation I can think of where my life has changed significantly is when I want to go drink all night and go to a club and be out late and have my mask off indoor drinking. I can't do that during a surge, although I can do it during the 3/4 of the time that there's not a surge. But if that's your biggest motherfucking priority in life, more so than not letting 40,000 people die a month, go get fucking counseling, because that's just not my biggest priority. I don't give a fuck. Go to your fucking club the next month, because these waves they're pretty short. I mean, they're a month to 6 weeks where there's really, really high risk of exposure. So I would also point out that because of the severe need that people have for this to be over and to pretend that we're in a completely different situation now, people push back on my boundary, which is literally just, I'm going to wear a mask indoors. That's it. I'm still going to see you. I socialize all the time. People want me to be unmasked indoors the same way that Republicans wanted Democrats to be unmasked indoors at the beginning. It's very much this is making me uncomfortable. I don't like that you're doing this. And to me, it's there's something psychological underlying that, where it's I need to prove the pandemic is over, and that can only be done if you stop shoving it in my face that it's not. And even if COVID were just the flu, which it's not, but let's just do a little intellectual experiment. COVID's the flu. When I get the flu, I tend to get sick for 2 to 3 weeks, and it's very miserable. If I had the choice between sitting in a restaurant and I know there's a really good chance I'm going to get the flu, and sitting 5 feet away on the patio, I know that I'm not going to get the flu, why would it be so hard to understand that I'm going to sit on the patio? That's fucking rational. So, like, people calling everything lockdown, people saying, like, oh my gosh, like, this is so bad, you know, you're wearing a mask indoors. It's like, I thought we were going to follow the science. The science fucking says this shit isn't over. And, like, if the Biden administration didn't understand that, why are they going out of their way to suppress testing and to suppress data that people can use to protect themselves? Because right now, we don't have reporting in DC. Like I mentioned, it's been 9 days and there's no accountability. No journalists are saying, hey, didn't you guys say you're going to put out this information once a week, even though that was already a bare minimum? I have no idea what's happening in my city. The bare minimum the Biden administration can do for us is give us the information we need to make reasonable choices for ourselves, which was supposed to be, you know, the far right version of how to deal with this anyway. Everyone assesses their own risk. I can't assess my own risk right now. But secondly, if people want to not be responsible for the continuing death of 40,000 people every month, just wear a mask inside. It's not that fucking big a deal.
It's been a public service announcement from the Doubleday Society. No, it's important. It's like, you know, it's just about what we value, because the only thing that I would like, and I've said it to you before, is you're like, it's unsustainable to have 40,000 people die a month. I want to put should. It should be unsustainable, but it's not, either communications-wise, it's not physically. We can handle this psychologically. This amount of death is something that is palatable.
Well, psychologically,
to Americans,
maybe, but
generally
workforce-wise, economy-wise, this is why people are fucking losing their shit and why inflation is off the charts. All of these things are related and they're refusing to connect them. But you can't kill 1 million workers every couple years and have that not affect your economy. Like, obviously. 1 million excess deaths. More than 1 million excess deaths, because we know we're undercounting.
One is reminded of the enclosure movement after the Black Plague in Britain.
It's going to be great for workers. The ones that survive and don't get disabled, it's going to be great. We're, you know, hopefully me, if I'm there, will be commanding a much higher salary. But you're going to see a lot of angry New York Times articles about how horrible it is that workers are asking for stuff.
But a bunch of op-eds in the future. Hey, let's do a culture one next time. All right, this was dark. You know, we should do another culture one next time. Let's think about that.
I really love the Yellow Jackets.
Yeah, people responded well to it, actually.
Oh, good.
So what should we watch next?
I wouldn't mind watching. Maybe one thing I would like to watch but haven't got around to yet is The Dropout.
I haven't watched it, and Julie's been pushing me to watch it. So,
is it good?
It's actually okay. Here's the thing. It's not really good.
Oh my God, save it, Julie. Save your analysis for when we do it on the show.
And Amanda Seyfried is amazing, and. Yeah, so it's worth watching for that. Like, I think it would be like a middle of the road show if it weren't for Amanda Seyfried, and the guy that plays Sonny is also really good, Naveen Andrews.
Yeah, oh yeah, I like him. Yeah, there's loads of posts on Reddit that like of people who were like, there's like advice pages on Reddit. There's loads of posts of people being like, I was interviewed, that are starting to come up now, like from sort of 10 years ago when people were like, I've been shortlisted for this job for this tech company, but the interview process was really weird and I'm getting a funny vibe. Should I go for it or not? And then like 10 years later, they were like, yeah, that's Theranos. That was Theranos. It's like...
Oh my God. Yes. Okay. That's the plan. We have a plan. This is going to be fun.
Okay, great. Good. Okay. That means because I've been lobbying Matt to watch it for ages, and now I can say I have to watch it for work. So.
Yeah, that's how I've been tricking Arun into watching a lot of stuff. He has to watch Independence Day next.
Yes.
I'm very excited for it.
Happy post-May Day, y'all.
Never seen it.
As a Brit, I have to say I love the bit where the Brits are for some reason in a bunker, and they're like, bloody good show, the Yanks got involved.
It's like Colonel Blimp pops out of someplace,
They go out around the world, and like half the people are like in huts, like the Americans, they figured it out.
Yeah.
Oh Lord, I'm in for a lot of treats.
It's
I'm in for a lot of treats.
90s.
Committee, comitato, committed, committedo, corul, committee, we young way, submittee, we committee.
يا حلا جلابي عضو القمر شوفي بكاسك إلي وبعتلي خبر عنب التوالي تامر وصنوبر والورد ببالي وعشفة صور.
Okay, Aaron, 4 minutes to go.
Okay. Mommy made me mash my Mayday M&Ms. Mommy made me mash my Mayday M&Ms. This is how I warm up. This is how we warm up.
I like the mantra.
And Papa, of course, made us mash our post Mayday M&Ms. What did you end up doing for Mayday? How was your Mayday?
Oh, it was great. I love Mayday. I'm of course a pagan, so I have a lot of fun for Mayday.
What does that involve for maybe we can talk to folks about that. Is that going to involve like a poll?
Yeah, it involves like fires and poles and orgies and kind of like a whole bacchanal for the spring.
And do we know the clear line? I don't mean to get you into doing show stuff before the show even starts. Do we know the clear line between this, what you're describing, and the kind of sensible, labor socialist holiday that people like me like to celebrate?
Right. Well, I think that, you can kind of combine the two. They both have very long and important histories. And so I would see nothing wrong with a kind of mix-up socialist pagan Labor Day celebration. I'd be into that.
Yeah, I've always thought of myself as a socialist with squeamish characteristics. I think that's how they described it. I think it's how Zhou and Lai described it.
This is the Global News Rodeo with Arun Chowdhury and Forrest Lovette.
Hi, and welcome back to the committee program. I am your host, Arun Chowdhury, and now your Global News Rodeo, a roundup of world events as curated by the show's own Forrest Lovette. Let's go. Item 1, a hard Labour's Day night. Labour wins in London, but still lags behind. The Socialist Workers reporting that the Labour Party won a series of local elections this Friday. The victories were in London districts, most notably the Wandsworth district, which was taken from the Tories for the first time in 44 years. Side note, famously, that's Margaret Thatcher's favorite district. I don't know exactly why. We can ask Ellie Mayo-Hagan in a minute. Labour is also expected to win Westminster Council for the first time since its inception in 1964. Observers said the voters were rejecting Boris Johnson's lies and corruption and channeling their rage at the rising cost of living in the city. However, Labour did worse nationwide in this local election than they did in 2018 with Jeremy Corbyn as the party leader. Some see this as a damning verdict for current Labour leader Keir Starmer. Salford Mayor and Labour member Paul Dennett said the party needs clarity on foreign policy and was quoted saying, "We've had years and years of austerity and we're facing costs of living crisis. Facing a cost of living crisis. When we're door knocking, we see people are really frustrated at the moment with the political system." The other thing that I will say is you also did see a lot of the things, a lot of the votes the Tories lost going to both the Lib Dems and the Greens, which is just not particularly helpful. Item 2, SCOTUS, Supreme Conservatives of the United States. Leaked abortion draft looms large. Democracy Now! Is reporting on the leaked draft opinion by the United States Supreme Court and their decision to overturn the landmark ruling of Roe v. Wade. In this draft, Justice Samuel Alito wrote Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. If the draft comes to fruition, it would strip away the guaranteed federal constitutional protections for abortion rights, which have been in place since 1973. The leaked opinion says that Justice Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Kavanaugh will join Alito in voting to overturn Roe v. Wade. 13 states have already passed trigger laws that will go into effect immediately if these conservative justices have their way. These states are among 26 states in total that are expected to enact a complete ban on abortion as soon as legally possible. Speaking to Democracy Now! Attorney Catherine Colbert said that the lopsided conservative court poses a threat not only to abortion rights, but to women's rights in general, such as the ability to use contraception, the ability to be sexual with somebody of the same sex, and the ability to marry for same-sex couples. I will say we were actually supposed to have Liz Winstead, friend of the show, on tonight to speak about repro rights. She is, of course, the executive director of Abortion Access Front and is an old friend. But that was before all of this happened, and so now she is much, much too busy to come join us. So actually, Hawley, Brett, and I are going to have a bit more to say about this in a bit. Item 3, Sri Lankan shutdown, millions of workers strike. Forrest, I feel like you didn't try with any of these. None of these have the spark of life. It's fine, and I'm actually really interested to hear what's going on in Sri Lanka because it's been across the whole Indian subcontinent. There's been a lot going on, but we need a little spark. Item 3, Sri Lankan shutdown, millions of workers strike. Deutsche Welle is reporting on workers' strike in Sri Lanka that had brought the country to a standstill. Millions of public and private sector workers walked out and took to the streets on Friday in protest to the government's mishandling of an ongoing financial crisis. The strike was organized by trade unions and civil organizations. Waving black flags, the workers called for the resignation of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Despite the continued pressure to step down, including protesters camped outside his office in the capital, Colombo, Rajapaksa continues to ignore demands and relinquish his power. The country is facing its worst financial crisis since it achieved independence in 1948. Last month, the Sri Lankan government was forced to default on its $51 billion in foreign debt after their reserves of U.S. dollars ran out. I mean, look, actually, I don't even want to editorialize on this. I want to bring some people in. We should do a roundup because there's so much going on in Pakistan. There's so much going Pakistan or Pakistan. You shouldn't mix those two things together, right? That's not what anyone's trying to do. But talking about Sri Lanka, talk about Pakistan, talk about India. I think there's enough to justify us taking an hour trip around and talking to some folks. Item 4, and I take it back, Forrest. We're hitting this one really hard, and I appreciate you. Item 4, hitting on the bong bong. Marcos, a heavy favorite in the upcoming Philippines election. The Guardian is reporting that 67.5 million Filipinos will vote on Monday, May 9th, to decide on a new president, along with thousands of other positions, including the vice presidency and the Senate. The clear frontrunner is Ferdinand Bong Bong Marcos, the son of former Philippine dictator Ferdinand Marcos Sr. According to U.S. News, Marcos is currently polling at 56%, far ahead of closest candidate Robredo, the incumbent vice president. After returning from exile, the Marcos family began to rebuild their public image. Bong Bong Marcos won elections for governor, congressman, and senator before running for president. Although departing President Rodrigo Duterte will have a controversial legacy, his party, the Federal Party of the Philippines, is likely to retain its control of the presidency, with Marcos also representing the PFP. And why not, right? And why not? This one is nuts. I mean, the only losers here are the Filipinos, which is not great. But this is just one for the record books.
Ciao and welcome back to our polling update here at the polling channel, brought to you by the committee program. In the German region of North Rhine-Westphalia, the CDU seem on track to edge the SPD per force opposing, with the Greens as a significant addition and biggest winner since last elections. The Liberal FDP are the big losers, and in fact, are. Scottish self-determination is caught between two fronts, with Savanta Comra's polls putting no on independence at 51% and yes at 49%. Terrible weather in the Philippines per Octopole, with strongman heartthrob Marcos dominating the field. He is, of course, the son of former strongman heartthrob Marcos. When asked, with the information you have at this time, would you vote to approve or reject the constitution proposed by the Constitutional Convention? In Chile, a small majority of voters are leaning reject at 56%, which is something we should keep an eye on. And a good old-fashioned Roy Morgan poll in Australia has both major parties in a dead heat at 35%. Cynics among you may have feeling about that, but we are simply here to report the weather. And in fact, from the staff here at the polling channel, thank you so much for watching and stay safe out there. And now, Committee Confessions.
Hi, and welcome back to the committee program, and this is Committee Confessions, where we go deep into our souls and let out the primal screams that can only come from things that bang around in the news. And who could be more appropriate guest than Hawley Brett, who is the papal and royal correspondent? I feel like this has sort of a pseudo-Catholic feel to it. Jacopo certainly put that into the credits, so I think it makes sense. Although the reason for the season is pretty shit, which is the Supreme Court, the leaked memo that says that they are intending to strike down Roe v. Wade. For our European folks, this is the court case that guarantees the right of people to an abortion. But I do want to say, and this will be the beginning of my confession, and this will then lead into yours, which will include a satirical letter, my favorite form of satire. If you've ever read the one the person read, which is Herzog writing to his cleaning lady. It's like one of my favorite things that's ever been written.
One.
Oh my God, yeah, it's so funny. But I just love the genre of satirical letter, and so I'm hoping that you'll read it for us on air. But look, it's easy to say, this is the horrible plan of which has been. Conservatives have wanted this for all 50 years of Roe, to take it down, to do bit by bit. I will say legally, it's one of those win the war, lose the peace things that progressives are so good at. It's sort of, you win the right to abortion in Roe v. Wade, but the history of it since then has been very effective grassroots efforts to make things hard. Like an abortion clinic has to have a certain size parking lot, right? Just sort of chipping away at the at what makes actually abortion clinics work and possible, which makes it rarer and rarer. And then the thing that's so horrible that I think maybe specifically I wanted to talk about and come on into the booth and yell about a bit is that this has sort of been set up by Democrats so complicitly in such sort of obvious ways, right? Losing this messaging war, almost throwing the messaging war,
right,
in a way that's reminiscent of Law and Order stuff, right? It's like, we don't want as many cops and they shouldn't be as bad, but we still want to be tough on crime. This kind of thing. People who are my age, Gen X and older, will just recall having pounded into our heads by Democrats in the 90s, whether it be Hillary Clinton or other folks, that abortion was tragic and should be made rare. And of course, it should maybe be legal, but we should definitely regulate it. Yeah, and this sort of pushed in and sort of really fed kind of an entire generation of people being afraid to say the word abortion and to have abortion activists being about anything but abortion. And I would say culminating in some of my real anger in organizations that talk about pro-choice things but are like involving themselves in primaries, say, between two pro-choice candidates like Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, right? Both pro-choice people. Why are repro dollars going to this kind of thing instead? And so I do think there's just been this sort of this abandonment of the messaging war. I mean, is any of that resonant with you?
100%. that all resonates with me. I think that right now, some of the Democratic leadership are acting like this is some huge surprise. Oh my God, Roe's going to fall. As if this plan wasn't being executed completely in the open the entire time for 50 years.
Yeah.
And so there's a huge refusal to look at any of the past decades and any of the past failures on this issue, whether they're rhetorical or strategic, such as supporting anti-choice candidates in the Democratic Party, which currently they're continuing to do. Jim Clyburn was just talking yesterday in support of a candidate in a Democratic primary who's anti-choice against a pro-choice woman candidate. That is right now. That is current. That's today. We're not defending 90s politics, something that happened in the 90s here. The current stance
it's true. Right.
House leadership right now is that we are a big tent and we making abortion a litmus test is purity politics.
And it's people, it is known, right? I think this is something everyone in the audience will know, that abortion is broadly popular in the U.S. in similar ways that it is other places. So this is like an instance of sort of minority opinion capturing majority through political ineptitude, through other things. But so many Democrats have run these pro-choice campaigns, moderate Democrats even in places like Colorado, have based their entire campaigns on reproductive rights and have never delivered a single legislative win, have never done the equivalent of the parking lot has to be this big. No, the parking lot doesn't have to be that big.
Right.
Leaving this up to the court, some would say, is sort of negligent of a supermajority. Not even just this one. Obama, of course, said he would
Obama
find
had a
something.
supermajority and said that with that supermajority, they were going to make it a priority to pass national legislation. And as soon as Obama got into office, they never touched that issue ever again. So to be clear, they did not try. This is not like, oh, they had a supermajority and they fought the fight and then lost in the final mile and just couldn't get it quite over the edge. No, they just completely abandoned even attempting that fight. And
I think this sort of pretend care is what your letter really gets at in such a smart, funny way. This sort of lack of actual care, but still strident.
And I think I just wanted to comment
on
two things. I think you said that I just want to take a little further, actually, because they're right on point. So one thing you mentioned was just the faith in the courts, right? Like the idea that the courts, that's where we find justice and the protection of civil liberties. That would be great. And maybe people older than me have some memories of that happening. Right? But my first encounter with a Supreme Court decision was Bush v. Gore, right? That's right when I was coming of age. So I have a very different view due to that. But I just think it's absolutely negligent to have continued to just put faith in the courts as if that's what's going to save us in the end of the day. Well, in real time, we see the court strategy just completely, crumbling and then not being anywhere on our side. And so I think the answer has always been to pass national legislation. And, frankly, I do feel with
national universal legislation, right?
Yeah.
For so many things, this is the only thing.
Yeah. And I'm really feeling with the court right now as they smack down democratic will and what we actually want to do. I'm actually feeling I almost feel like we should call their bluff, sort of. The Supreme Court's kind of saying the Constitution sucks and doesn't do enough and has major glaring gaps and problems. And maybe we should kind of call their bluff and be no, you know what? It is power to the people. It should be legislators, passing laws. Let's put the court in their place by actually passing the laws that we want. And even contemplating constitutional amendments. We should absolutely be thinking that big as to how we counter. There are answers for how you counter a Supreme Court that has gone way, way off the deep end and is totally overpowered and corrupted. But we just have to take them. And so just sitting there being the courts.
No, that would be an incredible thing to take. I would say that in similar ways, though, you see an ossification kind of even in progressive world of these kind of too big to fail institutions, right? When something goes wrong, people all start shoveling money at Move On, or something goes wrong. When something goes wrong in the repro world, people shovel money at Planned Parenthood. And I think they don't know that the actual reality of abortion healthcare being provided is done by independent clinics, that Planned Parenthood will not do an abortion after 14 weeks, which many people find themselves in a situation in which they do have to have abortion care after 14 weeks, and that there actually is just a very thin veneer of a handful of clinics who are doing this work. And I would like to direct our viewers to the Abortion Access Force and Abortion Access Front, who are a group who really keeps track of this stuff really well. And as you're looking for places that you do want to help and you do want to donate, I would just recommend the folks who aren't afraid to put abortion in their name, right? Talk about centering abortion. Let's actually do it.
Yeah, 100%.
All right.
I'm on team free abortion on demand.
I mean, it's not even that weird, and it's not even that new or something, right? This was considered an essential part of human liberation in for now, well over like 200 years.
Right.
You know, this has like been part of the political conversation, and it's
Right.
incredible
And seeing
to see the
something,
backslide.
right, like so core and foundational to the liberal philosophy and framework, right, just be like cast off as, I mean, I feel like the gaslighting right now is like abortion is identity politics. And it's purity politics.
Yeah.
Like that's the message.
Yeah.
And it's like,
You're like, no, come on, this is
fucking
super
material
important.
and real. Like what the fuck?
Yeah.
Could not be more real. Yeah.
But look, on the show, we talk about different ways to communicate. Satire is one of them.
I love
I do want you to
satire.
read your excellent letter. I do want you to read your excellent letter, which is told in the voice of a D-Trip fundraising email. Certainly a pinnacle of American political culture.
All right, are you ready for it?
Absolutely. I'm going to close
All
my
right.
eyes.
Urgent action required. Your life is on the line. It's a message from the GCCC. Dear Hawley, I wanted to reach out personally about the news of the Supreme Court's leaked decision overturning Roe and the Republican Party's attack on reproductive rights. As the chair of the DCCC, I want to inform you about the Democrats' plan to take on this fight, which we can do only with your support. First, I want to make a few things clear about the nature of the challenge we face. Let me reiterate my public statement following the news of the leaked decision. Democrats, we're angry and hurt, I know. But it is not about the filibuster, the size of the court, or what the Senate hasn't passed. It's about Republicans, not us. We can save our freedoms, but it's November, stupid. Those who think we should take any other stance than complete resignation in the face of the single largest rollback of human rights in the history of our country are hopelessly naive idiots when it comes to politics, a sophisticated science best handled by our expert political analysts. Anybody criticizing our approach should in fact be suspected as a right-winger who aims to thwart our path to progress. This is nothing to get hysterical about, and we hope that your pretty little head can't connect the dots between our previous neglect on the issue of abortion rights and other fundamental intersecting issues, and our current abdication of responsibility to protect our most core values and rights. For example, our failure to pass the Voting Rights Act will make it all the harder to vote and express the democratic will of the country, the people like you whose lives are at stake. Deeply unfair and racist gerrymandered districts that could have been prevented are now already locked in place, even if we were to pass legislation now. It's simply too late. This just means you'll have to work extra hard come November, digging deep to help us emerge victorious. We hope this makes you feel ever more inspired to vote and stand up with us as we take on this fight. There's some asking why, with control of the House, Senate, and presidency, we Democrats will not use every possible recourse to pass national legislation protecting the right to abortion, such as removing the filibuster and passing the Whole Women's Health Protection Act. It would be a tragedy and a disgraceful stain on our party's and nation history if Roe were to fall without an answer from Congress under a fully Democratic administration. But we must accept this as a fact. It will happen no matter what. And we need to look with optimism ahead to November, when there's an opportunity for our party to lose control of both the House and the Senate. This will provide a much clearer path to passing national legislation enshrining the right to abortion, and any other vision is amount to daydreaming. We could exert maximum pressure every hour, minute, and second in the lives of Senators Manchin, Sinema, and any others who support a regime of forced birth and the criminalization of pregnant people. But this is out of the question, even though this approach has not yet been tried on any other part of Biden's so far failed agenda. We will make no commitment to running a 50-state strategy to fight in every state house where abortion rights will be determined if there is no national action at this point from Democrats, which you'd presume would be the only backup plan failing action from national Democrats. We will not recruit and run pro-choice candidates in every contested race. What we will do is this. The DCCC and the DSCC will continue to fund anti-choice candidates with the personal support and endorsement of Democratic leadership, including Nancy Pelosi and Jim Clyburn, who are supporting an anti-choice male candidate against a pro-choice woman in a Democratic primary in Texas. Yesterday, Clyburn put it best when he argued that abortion cannot be a political litmus test for inclusion in the party, saying, We have a big tent party. And if we're going to be a big tent party, we got to be a big tent party. Since this is a primary and Democratic leadership could opt to support the pro-choice candidate instead, if the anti-choice candidate wins, Democrats could conceivably win the House in November by 1 seat, in which case we'd 1 vote short of being able to take action on abortion rights. This is just another great reason why we need even more Democrats in the House, and we need your support to make it happen. We need you to vote like your life depends on it, because it does. Our strategy will be to wait until the midterm elections, an opportunity to lose our current trifecta in Washington, to whip the votes out of you using this issue as our implement of force. We won't die on this hill, but you might. So we're banking on that fact and asking you to keep it in mind as your motivation to get out the vote come November. Our plan of what we would do if we were to even win in November is TBD, to enhance the element of surprise. Faith always requires a little leap, and we're asking you to take this leap with us now as we take on this fight. Remember, your life and freedom is on the line. Tell Republicans now, stop the attack on reproductive rights. Sincerely, Sean Patrick Mahoney, DCCC Chair.
Oh, applause, applause, applause. Look, I know you need to get out of character and get back into character as the royal and papal correspondent, because in 2 segments, that is where we're going to be at. But I really appreciate you being here with us in the booth, and I really appreciate this piece of writing from you, which I think is hilarious. And maybe send us a text. Maybe we can do a thing where it scrolls while you read.
That would be
It could
great.
be
Yes, I will send it along. Thanks for having me today.
And now, keeping up with the Hapsburgs.
Full of flavor and ideology, Cadre Cigarettes and you, perfect together, and sponsors of the committee program. And now, once again, we have fan favorite Hawley Brett and our ongoing saga of a story of Europe's most famous family, keeping up with the Hapsburgs, in which Hawley, who is our continental royal and papal correspondent, we still have openings for our rail correspondent, all of you train nerds.
I like trains too.
You can't do everything, okay? You've got a beat, you've got a good beat, just stick to it.
Okay.
And let's get back into it. I mean, I will say, I know we took a step into the Stone Age last time. I will say that I am still excited about getting towards the Reformation.
Me too.
So where do you want to start us off today?
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to really kind of check in with is there was this article recently in the Atlantic. It was about Europe's ex-royals. So that's been on my radar because the article was looking at who the players are in Europe and the family histories of even a wider pool of people than just the Hapsburgs. Of course, we look at the Hapsburgs too.
The King of Albania, I saw, seemed to be living a very modest life in that article.
Indeed. And I loved the moment when Karl von Habsburg, of course, he's the head of House of Habsburg-Lorraine. We're fans of him here on this show. I really loved the moment when he came on the Zoom with the reporter, and the reporter asked him, what can an old family like the Habsburgs offer Europe in the 21st century? And I think that his response was spot on. He said, I actually even have the quote right here. Hold on. He said, a sense of history. If you want to understand or do any prediction on what might theoretically happen in the future, you have to base it on something, right? So obviously, I couldn't agree more. And perhaps also tellingly of the future, Karl in that moment, he also said that the Habsburgs, they've only been out of power for 2 generations. And comparatively, that's actually not very long if you look at the rest of the family history, right? So I think there might be some implication there, who knows, but of future power that the Habsburgs could hold.
Well, where are we going to start? Where are we going to start today with the Hapsburgs, knowing, of course, that they're probably all going to be, part of Elon Musk's Twitter mafia on the continent, launching forward.
So I think just really quickly before we get there, I did want to talk actually about a couple other families that were mentioned in the articles and how
other families.
Yeah, because the Habsburgs, they really, they weren't operating in a vacuum, right? They were operating in the interplay of all of these other royal families in Europe. And so we have to understand how they intertwine in order to understand the modern day arena of all of these different ex-royals.
Right. I'm up for this. Totally.
Great.
Let's hear the other teams. Teams.
Great. So the other teams.
Yeah.
So we have the Bourbons, right? So the Bourbons were a European royal family originating in France. They ruled for many centuries, mostly in France, but also in Sicily and Spain. And they had a hostile relationship with the Habsburgs, often fighting with them and not intermixing as much of others. And we have
and with the time we're talking about now, everybody's super Catholic, so there's not going to be any like we're more Catholic than you kind of stuff.
Everybody's super Catholic, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But don't worry, we'll get there. So we also have the Romanovs who were mentioned. They were the Russian emperors, right? They were, of course.
These families are all the same.
They basically
what I mean?
are, right? Yeah, and they're all very old, and they also largely ruled until early on in the 20th century, right? They all similarly faced coups and revolutions and sometimes executions, right? Like the Romanovs were all executed, of course, in the Russian Revolution. And now they do have some modern day family members, distant relatives who claim succession, and
it's always shady though, right?
It's always shady. I feel
like the Bourbons have more paperwork. Yeah,
they have way more paperwork. There are at least 3 modern day individuals in France who lay claim to the French dynasty, and they are pretty silly people. So on top of that, we also have, and this is who I really want to talk about. Okay. We have the House of Hohenzollern. So the House of Hohenzollern, it's of particular importance to us in relationship to the Habsburgs. It has many parallels and also intersections with them over time. I think there's even a case, because they have modern day descendants too, so I think there's even a case for like a whole spin-off show for keeping up with the Hohenzollerns. They're really cool.
Are they from more northern Germany? Because I will say, I think there's things named after them, like my doctor's street, I think is.
Yeah, that wouldn't be too surprising. They actually originated in Swabia along...
back in Swabia. So they are super local to the Habsburgs.
Super local to the Habsburgs. In the 11th century is when they originated. So they also originated at a very similar time. And they supported another house. The House of Hohenstaufen was also a noble house in Swabia at the time. And those 3 houses all actually worked together and were quite amicable and mutually supportive.
I'm pretty sure that you made the last one of them up, but this is incredibly interesting, and I think probably speaks to a higher truth. So we will forgive you that.
Yes, thank you.
Is that the chessboard, basically?
Yeah. Well, I think I do have just a few more notes, a few more quick notes on the Hohenzollerns, because they did come to be very significant later on, even though they weren't as powerful earlier on. They came to occupy the positions of Emperor of Prussia and King of Germany. And they did so until the German Revolution, in which they were ousted. And that was after Germany's defeat in World War I, right? So we see all of these rulers kind of facing the consequences of World War I and the aftermath, and the revolutions taking place at that time.
Yeah, we're in Charlottenburg here, so that's definitely kind of the heart of old Prussia. For us,
exactly. Yeah. Right. And the Hohenzollern, so they were split into 2 branches, right? We have the Swabian branch on one hand, and they were Catholic. and we have the Franconian branch on the other. And though the Franconian branch is the one who became the rulers of Prussia, and very critically, they had actually became Protestant in the 16th century. So they broke off significantly from the Catholic side and from Catholic interests at that time. And their break is a huge part of the Protestant Reformation in the history there, which I'm just so excited to get to soon.
I know I'm excited for that, as you know, so I don't even mean to like jinx it by harping on it. So I just want to ask you, the tradition that we hear constantly of Prussia and their military, and to be honest, up here there isn't that much going on in terms of agriculture or industry, so it makes sense to have a good military. Is that from there? Is that something that the house was known for? You know, if the Habsburgs were known for their sort of scheming marriages and power brokering, they were more known for their march on in straight lines and get it done?
Yeah, I think that that's right. And I think that it was important for them for a long time. They were always under threat, right? So being able to have, defenses and be armed and be able to protect yourself, that's how they survived through centuries of attacks on their family dynasty.
This is so interesting. And so how do you think that we have the lay of the land? What are the Habsburgs better at than all of these folks? Why do we talk about them?
Right. Well, I think that the Habsburgs have far more compelling contemporary heirs. I think that Karl especially is really
back on Karl.
Back on Karl. I think that he's doing such a great job of representing the Habsburg line, and all of the Habsburgs virtually do work in politics. And I think that they're the ones who are really advancing how a so-called ex-royal can really be royal in today's world.
Look, and I hesitate to make any comparisons because it's specifically not your job. This is specifically not your job. But when it comes to the ex-royal world, you mean how people who hold on to titles can continue to exercise power, not how can Meghan Markle continue,
That's
to
right.
do the Meghan Markle thing.
That's right. The Meghan Markle thing is its whole own thing.
That is its own thing. Listen, I know we didn't get there, but I appreciate you letting us see these other players on the field. I often say the supporting characters in politics are the ones that we don't look at, and we should. So we appreciate you bringing them in and giving us a much richer tapestry that the Habsburgs are sewing on. Are they sewing on a tapestry? You don't paint on a tapestry. You sew the tapestry.
Embroider?
You can embroider the tapestry, and I think that that's what we're doing here together. Thank you so much, Hawley Brett, for coming on with us, and I hope you had a good May Day, and I hope that we'll see you soon.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks so much for tuning into the committee program. We know you have many options when it comes to content consumption, and we appreciate your attention to this new season with new episodes on Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and at 10 p.m. Central European Time. You can support the show by becoming a member on patreon.com/the committee program. You can follow committee on Twitter, /committee pro, on YouTube, the committee program, on Instagram, the committee program, on Facebook, the committee program, and you can visit the committee program company store at tpublic.com, the committee program shop. Special thanks, as always, to our team, Xhevat Kastrati, Fiamma Meli, Jacopo Castelletti, Forrest, Lovette, and committee's deputy director, Julia Doubleday. Look alive out there. It's later than you think.
It's the end of our broadcast day. Thanks for listening. This was the 13th program in our second series. For more global infotainment from the committee program, click on the video screen right or screen left. Please like and subscribe to the committee program on Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern